Hello everyone. This lecture video on Open Economy Macroeconomics will deal with the automatic price adjustment mechanism to correct the balance of payment disequilibrium. The automatic price adjustment mechanism will operate differently under the fixed exchange rate and flexible exchange rate. First of all, we shall consider the operation of the automatic price adjustment mechanism under the fixed exchange rate, specifically under a particular fixed exchange rate regime which is called the gold standard. The gold standard operated from about 1880 to the outbreak of the First World War in 1914. An attempt was then made to re-establish the gold standard after the First World War, but the attempt failed in 1931 during the Great Depression. Now there are different discussions of re-establishing the gold standard even today, but it is highly unlikely that this will happen. The study of gold standard seems relevant because the advantages and disadvantages of the system is not only applicable for this particular regime, but it was also applicable for the other fixed exchange regime that operated from the end of the Second World War until it collapsed in 1971. So specifically for the Bretton Woods system or for the gold exchange standard. There were certain characteristic features of the gold standard. Firstly, the currency of the country operating on the gold standard was either made of gold or, if of paper, the country should stand ready to freely convertible its currency into gold on demand. Secondly, there has to be free inflow and outflow of gold in the economy whenever there is the requirement. And thirdly, there should be a close connection between the quantity of money and quantity of gold available in the country. As the supply of gold rises, the quantity of money should rise and vice versa. So basically, it was dependent on the classical quantity theory of money. Now, with these characteristic features of the gold standard, now we can try to find out what are the ways in which the gold standard operated. The gold standard was based on automatic price adjustment mechanism when it tried to correct the balance of payment disequilibrium. Under the gold standard, each nation defined gold content of its currency and it passively stood ready to buy or sell any amount of gold at that price. As the gold content of each currency was fixed, the exchange rate between the currencies was also fixed. We can take an example to show this. For example, under the gold standard, 1 pound gold coin in the United Kingdom contained 113.0016 grains of pure gold, while $1 gold coin in the US contained 23.22 grains of pure gold. Therefore, the dollar price of pound or the exchange rate, which is defined as dollar per unit of pound, was simply calculated as 4.87. Now this is called the mint parity. The exchange rate was allowed to fluctuate above and below this mint parity, but within some upper band and the lower band. These bands were defined by the cost of shipping gold from one country to other. The movement of the exchange rates to move beyond these bands was halted or controlled by exportation and importation of gold from the country. These points were defined as gold points. One is called the gold export point and the other is called the gold import point. So now we shall consider the derivation of these gold points, and with the help of this we can analyze the gold flows under the gold standard. Let us now suppose that the cost of shipping 1 pound worth of gold between New York and London was about 3 cents. Now the exchange rate between dollar and pound then could not fluctuate by more than 3 cents above and below the mint parity. So it could not rise above $4.90, so $4.87 plus 3 cents of shipping cost, or it cannot fall below $4.84, which is calculated as $4.87 minus the 3 cents of shipping cost. So we can explain this. Suppose the exchange rate rises for some reason or other above $4.90 for pound 1. Then everybody will purchase $4.87 worth of gold at US Treasury, send it to London by paying 3 cents of shipping cost, and then exchange it for pound 1. Therefore, the total cost of conversion will be $4.87 plus 3 cents, which is exactly equal to $4.90. So, if anyone charges more than $4.90 for 1 pound, that person will never be getting any customer. Similarly, if the exchange rate falls below $4.84 for 1 pound, then everybody will purchase pound 1 worth of gold in London, ship it to New York by paying 3 cents, and then exchange it for $4.87. Therefore, the net gain of the person would be $4.87 minus 3 cents, the shipping cost, which is exactly equal to $4.84. So, if for pound 1 somebody wants to pay only an amount which is less than $4.84, then it is not possible to find out any customer. Therefore, the exchange rate cannot rise more than 4.90 or it cannot fall less than 4.84. So, it is the shipping cost which determines the extreme values. From the analysis, it is clear that as the exchange rate rises above $4.90 per pound, gold flows out of the US economy or the domestic economy. So this is called the gold export point of US. So the US supply curve of pound will become infinitely elastic or horizontal at $4.90 per pound. So at this level of exchange rate, the supply curve of pound is infinitely elastic, or the supply will be anything at this particular price. Similarly, if the exchange rate falls below $4.84 for pound 1, then everybody would purchase pound 1 worth of gold in London, then ship it to New York by paying 3 cents and then exchange it for $4.87. Therefore, the net gain for the person would be $4.87 minus 3 cents, which is exactly equal to $4.84. So, therefore, if for any 1 pound a less than $4.84 price is quoted, then nobody will be standing ready to accept that, because just by shipping gold from one country to another, it is possible to have a net gain of $4.84. Therefore, $4.84 will be marking the minimum price, and $4.90 will be marking the maximum price. Now, as the exchange rate rises above $4.90 per pound, then gold is flowing out of the domestic economy or the US economy. So, this exchange rate is called the gold export point of United States. The US supply curve of pound becomes infinitely elastic or horizontal at this particular exchange rate. At this exchange rate, an infinite amount of pound will be available for the United States. Similarly, as the exchange rate falls below $4.84 per pound, gold will be flowing into the US economy or the domestic economy. Therefore, this exchange rate is called the gold import point of United States. So, the US demand curve for pound is infinitely elastic at $4.84 per pound. At this price, the demand curve for pound will be horizontal and the US economy will be demanding an infinite amount of external currency or the pound. The equilibrium exchange rate in between these two gold points will be determined by the demand-supply mechanism. Now we can show graphically how under gold standard international gold flows will be there and how the balance of payment surplus or deficit may be created. The US supply curve of pound is given as SEAM, which becomes infinitely elastic at the US gold export point, which is nothing but $4.90 per pound. Similarly, the demand curve for pound in the US market is given by DEBN, which becomes once again horizontal or infinitely elastic at the US gold import point, which is 4.84. The mint parity is attained at 4.87, where the demand and the supply curve intersect each other. At this exchange rate or at mint parity, there is no international gold flow. Therefore, the US balance of payment will be in equilibrium. Now suppose due to some reason or other, the US demand curve for import shifts parallelly upward to D pound prime. If the supply curve of pound were normal upward rising, then the equilibrium would have obtained at point T, where the exchange rate would have increased beyond 4.90. But under the gold standard, the supply curve is not of usual shape and the exchange rate cannot move beyond 4.90. Therefore, the new demand curve will be cutting the original supply curve at its horizontal stretch, so that the new equilibrium will be attained at point M. Now clearly at point M, the total demand for pound is more than the total supply of pound. Now the total demand for foreign currency will give us the total demand for import, and the total supply of foreign currency will be giving us the total amount of export. So at this point there is a deficit by the amount AM, or it is the excess demand for pound. Since there is excess demand for pound, then gold will be flowing out of the US economy. Let us now assume that given the demand, the supply curve of pound increases so that the supply curve shifts from the original line to the new red line. If the demand curve were a straight line, negatively sloped straight line, then the new equilibrium would have attained at point S, where the new supply curve would have intersect the original demand curve. But under the gold standard, the demand curve is not always negatively sloped, so that there will be a horizontal stretch and the new supply curve is cutting the horizontal stretch of the demand curve at point N. At this level of exchange rate, there is an excess supply of pound by an amount Bn, because here the supply curve is cutting the demand curve at its horizontal stretch, so that the supply of pound will be exceeding the demand for pound, so that there will be a tendency for the exchange rate to fall below 4.84, but that is not permissible under the gold standard. So therefore the exchange rate will remain at 4.84, and there will be a surplus in terms of the balance of payments, and the economy will be experiencing an import of gold into the domestic economy. The automatic adjustment mechanism to correct the BOP disequilibrium under the gold standard is based on the price PC flow mechanism. Hume in 1752 introduced the price PC flow mechanism in order to demonstrate the futility of the belief of the mercantilists that a nation could continuously accumulate gold by exporting more than it imported. In the mercantilists' theory, it is believed that the stock of precious metals, for example gold and silver, these are very, very important for the economic power and well-being of a nation. So if a nation could accumulate the stock of precious metals, for example gold and silver, then its economic well-being will increase, and if the stock depletes, then the economic well-being will be deteriorating. Now, how could a nation build up its stock of precious metal? So when the economy exports something, then the stock of precious metals will be coming into the economy itself, and when the country is importing, then the stock of precious metal will be depleted because imports will be paid by using this gold or by silver. Therefore, a nation can accumulate the stock of precious metals such as gold and silver by exporting more than it imported. Now, the classicals were not in a position to believe in this idea. So, Hume introduced the price specie flow mechanism to show that it is not possible for a country to build up a reserve of gold by exporting more than it imported. Hume tried to show this with the help of the price specie flow mechanism, which in turn was based on the quantity theory of money introduced by the classical economist. The quantity theory of money may be explained as MV is equal to PQ. Now, the left hand side of this equation shows M as the nation's money supply, V is the velocity of circulation of money. So this is guided by some institutional factors. So, and by definition, it is the number of times each unit of the money or domestic currency changes hand on average during a particular period. On the right hand side, we have P as the price level and Q as the level of output. Now, in the classical model, V is fixed because it is guided by the institutional factors, and Q is fixed at the full employment level because there is no excess capacity, no inflation, so the economy will be always producing at the full employment level of output. Therefore, given V and Q, there is a direct or a positive relationship between the money supply and the price level. So, if the money supply rises in the economy, then the general price level will also rise, and vice versa. So, this quantity theory of money was very, very important in order to discuss the price specie flow mechanism. As is clear from the earlier diagram, that in a deficit nation, gold will be flowing out of the domestic economy. Now, as the deficit nation loses gold, its money supply will fall because under the gold standard, the money is either gold itself, or if it is a paper currency, then it will be backed by gold. So therefore, in a deficit nation, when the money supply falls as gold flows out, the price level will also fall. As prices fall, there will be a change in exports and imports. Now the domestic prices are lower than the international prices. Therefore, exporters will now be encouraged to sell their products not in the domestic market but in the international market, because then they will be getting a higher price. So when the price falls, then the exports will be encouraged, whereas with a rise in the export, there will be a fall in import also. As the domestic price falls, then the imported commodities will be relatively cheaper in the domestic market as compared with the international market. Therefore, everybody will try to reduce their import and they will instead buy the domestically produced import substituting commodities. Therefore, the imports will also be reduced. So, in the deficit nation, as gold flows out of the economy, money supply falls, price level falls, exports are encouraged and imports are discouraged, so that ultimately the deficit will be cured and the gold outflow will stop as soon as the deficit is cured. So that is how the automatic price adjustment mechanism occurred through the price specie flow mechanism. So it is in operation as soon as there is any balance of payment disequilibrium, and it will stop once the economy reaches the balance of trade equilibrium. The reverse will happen in the surplus nation. So in the surplus nation, gold will be flowing into the economy itself. Now as gold flows in, the money supply will rise, prices will also rise. As the domestic price rises, the exporters will not be tempted to sell their products in the international market. Rather, they will now try to sell their commodities in the domestic market because they will be getting a higher price. So far as the imports are concerned, the price of the domestically produced import substituting goods will now be higher. Therefore, the imports will be preferred. The domestic consumers will be going for importation of the good. Therefore, in the surplus nation, automatically the exports will be discouraged and imports will be encouraged. So ultimately, the surplus will be reduced and automatically the balance of trade will be driven down to zero. So that is how the price adjustment mechanism operates. So it is just an automatic mechanism as it was being discussed earlier. So it will be triggered as soon as the balance of payment disequilibrium arises, and it will continue to operate until the disequilibrium is completely eliminated. Now, of course, there are certain requirements. The adjustment will rely on the change in the internal prices in the nations that are facing disequilibrium. Moreover, exports and imports in the surplus and deficit nations should be very sensitive to the price movement, so that whenever there is any change in the prices, the volume of exports and imports will be responding readily and significantly to such price changes. However, one point must be mentioned here. Now, here the government stands ready to allow the money supply to change for the balance of payment considerations automatically. Therefore, if that is true, then the nation or the government cannot use the monetary policy for reaching the full employment without inflation. So, monetary policy can no longer be used as a policy instrument. However, this gold standard operation is basically in a classical framework, so that it is not actually an issue, so that money supply is not that important to attain the full employment without inflation. Moreover, for the adjustment process to operate, the nations were not supposed to sterilize the effect of deficit or surplus in their balance of payment on their money supply. Actually, it is required that the deficit nation will reinforce the adjustment process by restricting credit, and the surplus nation was to expand the credit further so as to facilitate the proper working of the adjustment process. Let us now consider the disequilibrium in the international transactions and find out the efficacy of fixed versus flexible exchange rate to bring about equilibrium in context of international transactions. In the diagram, the demand and supply of pound, which is the foreign currency for the United States, are shown along the horizontal axis, and the exchange rate expressed as dollar per unit of pound is shown on the vertical axis. The demand curve for pound and the supply curve of pound intersect at point A to start with. Therefore, the equilibrium exchange rate is R0, whereas OM is the amount of demand and supply of pound. Now let us assume that the demand curve for import shifts from D pound to D pound 1 due to some external factors. Therefore, at the given exchange rate R0, the demand for pound becomes R0B, whereas the supply of pound remains unchanged at R0A. Therefore, AB, this amount shows the excess demand for pound. Now, as there is excess demand for pound, then The exchange rate must rise from R0 to R2, where the new demand curve D pound 1 is intersecting the original supply curve is pound. Therefore, the exchange rate must rise from R0 to R2, whereas the demand and supply of pound should rise from OM to ON. Now, this is possible only under the flexible exchange rate system. Through this process, actually, any deficit or any surplus will be automatically corrected under the flexible exchange rate system. Now, when the demand curve for pound shifts from D pound to D pound 1, there is an excess demand for pound given by AB. Now, excess demand for pound means that the demand for pound is more than the supply of pound. So, demand for pound gives us the demand for import, and the supply of pound shows us the supply of export. At R0 then, with D pound 1 and S pound, there is an excess demand for pound of amount AB. Therefore, it is exactly giving us the amount of deficit in the balance of payment, which is equal to AB. Now, whenever there is deficit in the balance of payments under the flexible exchange rate system, the exchange rate will automatically rise, or the domestic currency will automatically depreciate, so that the new equilibrium is attained, where the demand for import will be exactly equal to the supply of export, so that at new equilibrium point T, the entire deficit will be eliminated. Now, we may consider the logic behind this also. Now, as there is deficit in the balance of payment and there is automatic rise in the exchange rate, or the domestic currency depreciates, then automatically exports will be encouraged and imports will be discouraged. Exactly the reverse thing will be happening if the economy has a surplus in its balance of trade. So, in that case, the exchange rate will automatically fall, so that in the new equilibrium, the balance of trade will once again be balanced, so that all kinds of surplus will be eliminated. Now, this is possible under the flexible exchange rate system. But suppose we are operating under the fixed exchange rate, and to start with, the exchange rate is at point R0. Now, as the demand curve for import shifts to D pound 1, the exchange rate cannot rise automatically to R2 so as to ensure equilibrium once again. So, in that case, the government will have to take initiative, or it will have to change the exchange rate so as to cure the balance of payment deficit. The exchange rate will be devalued by the amount R0, R2, so that ultimately it will be reaching R2. Now, under the fixed exchange rate system, since the method to correct the balance of payment disequilibrium is a policy issue, the government may decide not to devalue its currency by R0, R2 amount. Rather, it may decide to increase its exchange rate from R0 to R1 only. In that case, there will be some amount of deficit in the balance of payment, and the exchange rate will be devalued only partially. Now, often the government might take such policy because, as we have discussed earlier, devaluation or depreciation of course will be giving some competitive edge to the country in question, but it will be making its trading partners worse off. Therefore, if one country devalues, the other country will also retaliate by devaluing their own currency, so that there will be a competitive devaluation and the original gain will be eroded. Moreover, devaluing the currency might affect the reputation of the country in question. So, the other countries might feel that the economic position of this country is not strong enough, so that it is devaluing its currency. So, often the government doesn't go for exchange rate devaluation by a great extent. So, in that case, for example, then the exchange rate might increase by only R0, R1, so that some amount of deficit will be maintained in the balance of payments. Now, however, if we now come back to the flexible exchange rate regime, then we find that the price adjustment will be automatic in the balance of payment under the flexible exchange rate system. So whenever there is a deficit, the exchange rate will rise automatically, and whenever there is a surplus, then the exchange rate will fall automatically. However, this adjustment mechanism will depend on many things. It will depend on the elasticities of demand, supply, and most importantly, it will depend on whether the international equilibrium is stable or not. Because if the equilibrium is stable, then and then only the excess demand will lead to the rise in price, and the excess supply will be leading to a fall in the price. But if the equilibrium is not stable, then excess demand will be leading to further fall in the price, and excess supply might lead to further rise in price. So any deviation from the equilibrium will not be self-correcting, so that whenever there is any deviation from the equilibrium, forces will not generate within the economy automatically, which will move the system towards the equilibrium. Therefore, now we shall try to find out how this question of stability is so important in the context of a flexible exchange rate system, while the nation is trying to correct its balance of payment disequilibrium automatically. In figure A, we have the negatively sloped demand curve and positively sloped supply curve of the foreign currency. Now here the equilibrium is stable. So initially the equilibrium is attained at point E and the exchange rate is R0. Now at any exchange rate below R0, say at R1, there is an excess demand for pound which is given by the amount AB, or which is equal to MN. Now if there is excess demand for pound, then the price of pound must rise, so that the exchange rate must rise to R0. So any excess demand will be automatically corrected, and excess demand means deficit, so that any deficit will be automatically corrected. The reverse is true at the exchange rate R2, where the country is having an excess supply of pound which is exactly equal to the amount CD. Now as the exchange rate is higher, then and there is excess supply, so it will be having a tendency to fall to R0. So once again the equilibrium is stable and deficit or surplus will be automatically corrected. Now in this diagram, the demand and supply curves are of usual shape, but these shapes have nothing to do with the stability or instability of the equilibrium. In figure B, the demand curve is negatively sloped, whereas the supply curve is also negatively sloped. But here the supply curve is steeper than the demand curve. But here we can always find out that at any exchange rate which is above R0, there is an excess supply for pound, so that prices fall or the exchange rate falls automatically, so that it reaches R0, and any exchange rate below R0, suppose at R1 there will be an excess demand for pound, so that the economy will automatically be moving towards the equilibrium point E by increasing the exchange rate. So here again also the equilibrium is stable, and any surplus or any deficit will be automatically corrected. The real problem is there in figure C, where the equilibrium is unstable. So at any exchange rate above R0, say at R2, there is an excess demand for pound, or equivalently a deficit in the balance of trade. Since there is excess demand for pound, the price of pound will rise further, so that exchange rate will rise further above R2. So at all these levels there will be further and further excess demand, so that exchange rate will continue to rise, so that it will be never coming back to the equilibrium level E. so that the equilibrium is not stable. We can consider the exchange rate which is below R0, say at R1 there is an excess supply for pound, so that the price will fall further beyond R1, therefore it will not come back to the equilibrium level E0. Now in this unstable equilibrium there will be some problem with the balance of payment disequilibrium. Here the deficit and the surplus will not be automatically corrected. Now in order to find out the automatic adjustment mechanism, it would be really very helpful if we have ideas about the supply and the demand curve. But in reality we usually do not have any estimation about the supply or demand curve, or it is very difficult to estimate the supply on the demand curve. So that if we can get the price elasticities of demand and price elasticities of supply, then we can very easily find out the condition for the stability in the foreign exchange market, and hence we can find out the condition for a devaluation or a depreciation to be successful in order to cure the balance of payment disequilibrium. So that is what was done exactly by Marshall and Lerner, and their condition is the Marshall-Lerner condition or the MLC. Now the beauty of the Marshall-Lerner condition is that it gives us, in terms of the price elasticities of exports and the imports, the condition under which the devaluation or depreciation will be successful in order to cure the balance of payment disequilibrium. This diagram shows the disequilibrium in the international transactions and the conditions for stability for large exchange rate changes. Now in this diagram we have three equilibrium points at E0, E1 and E2. Clearly the point E0 is not stable because any deviation from E0 will not be self-correcting. But however, starting from E0, if the exchange rate starts falling and once it reaches the exchange rate associated with E1, then once again we shall be reaching one particular equilibrium which is stable. Similarly, if starting from point E0 the exchange rate starts rising, then if it reaches the exchange rate E2, then once again a stable equilibrium will be reached. So here the equilibrium may be stable but only under very large exchange rate changes. Now this type of exchange rate movements may be, or exchange rate requirements may be very difficult or awkward for the government in order to set the policy, because then a stable equilibrium may be reached only if the exchange rate has moved drastically in either direction. So it is very important to find out the elasticities of the demand and the supply curves in order to arrive at the condition for the balance of payment disequilibrium correction. So now we shall be considering the Marshall-Lerner condition, and we shall try to find out how this balance of payment will be corrected under a flexible exchange rate system, or of course under a fixed exchange rate system if the government takes up devaluation as a policy. Now we derive the Marshall-Lerner condition. We start from the equation for the balance of trade, which is nothing but the total value of export minus the total value of import. Now here export is given in terms of the domestic currency, whereas imports are given in terms of the foreign currency. But here the balance of trade will be expressed in terms of the domestic currency. Therefore, exports are already in terms of domestic currency, but then we multiply imports by the exchange rate, where exchange rate is just the home currency per unit of foreign currency, in order to express imports in terms of the domestic currency. Now the trade balance becomes X minus M into E. Now we differentiate both sides with respect to E, and we are at equation 1. We divide both sides by X to get equation 2. We start from a no surplus, no deficit state, or from a balanced trade state, so that the value of export is exactly equal to the value of import. Therefore, we start from the equilibrium condition that X is equal to M times E. Now we just use this in equation 2 and then we arrive at equation 3, and just by a simple modification we arrive at equation 4. The left hand side of equation 4 shows the proportionate change in trade balance with respect to the exchange rate change. On the right hand side, dx de into E by X is the price elasticity of exports, whereas dm de into E by M is the price elasticity of import. We have started from a balanced trade condition. Now we are trying to find out the condition under which a change in the exchange rate, specifically a rise in the exchange rate, will be improving the balance of trade. So that we are trying to find out the condition under which a depreciation or devaluation of the home currency will be improving the trade balance, or it will be reducing the deficit. If a depreciation or devaluation of the home currency improves the trade balance, then the left hand side must be greater than 0, because in that case an increase in exchange rate will lead to a surplus in the balance of trade, because we have started from a situation of balanced trade. So if the left hand side is greater than 0, then that will be requiring that the right hand side will also be greater than 0. So that will mean that price elasticity of export plus the price elasticity of import will have to be greater than 1. Now the price elasticity of import is just like the price elasticity of demand for a simple commodity, because imports are demand for goods that are produced not in the domestic market but in the international market. So that price elasticity of demand for import will be similar to the price elasticity of demand for any other commodity, and so it will be negative. So to make it positive, we shall be using a negative sign in front of that. Therefore, in the right hand side of equation 4, we have price elasticity of export minus dm de E by M, where this minus de minus dm de E by M should be treated as the price elasticity of import. Therefore, the Marshall-Lerner condition turns out to be price elasticity of export plus price elasticity of import has to be greater than 1. Now we have shown that we have started from a balance of trade condition, and under this situation, if this condition, Marshall-Lerner condition, is satisfied, then any depreciation or devaluation of the home currency or a rise in the exchange rate will improve the trade balance. Therefore, if we start from a deficit and if this condition is satisfied, then of course the deficit will be cured, or at least the deficit will be reduced partially. In fact, as the theories of international trade show that this condition, Marshall-Lerner condition, is the condition for the stability of the international equilibrium. So here we get one important result. So the Marshall-Lerner condition is very, very important in a flexible exchange rate system, and of course in a fixed exchange rate system when the government is taking the devaluation as one of the policy measure. Since this condition is the condition for stability of the international equilibrium in the international market rather, then it shows that if the market is stable, international market is stable, then automatically Marshall-Lerner condition will be satisfied and any devaluation or depreciation will be improving the trade balance, or it will cure the deficit. One thing, however, is clear from here. Now, if the individual elasticities are greater than 1, then the condition is automatically satisfied. This, however, does not mean that if the individual elasticities are less than 1, this condition will not be satisfied. So if the elasticities are less than 1 but substantially higher, then the sum may be greater than 1. While the Marshall-Lerner condition is so important, the question arises is that are the elasticities sufficiently large so that this Marshall-Lerner condition may be satisfied? Now, before the Second World War, it was believed that the foreign exchange market was first of all stable and the demand for and the supply of foreign exchange were very elastic, so that the supply of export and the import elasticities are really very high. So Marshall and the others advanced this view, but actually they offered no empirical justification for their belief. During 1940s, a number of empirical studies were undertaken in order to measure the price elasticities in the context of international market. Two such studies may be mentioned. One was undertaken by Chang, one in 1945, to measure the price elasticity of demand for imports in 21 nations, for which the data was there from 1924 to 1939. And another study was undertaken in 1949 to measure the price elasticity of demand for export of 22 nations over the same period. The result of the study was indeed very important. Now, Chang found out that although the market was stable, so that the elasticities were such that the sum was greater than 1, but the individual elasticities were not that high, so that the demand and the supply curve were in fact very steep. Later on, the finding was supported in other empirical works, and the result was called the elasticity pessimism. Elasticity pessimism basically means that the export and the import elasticities are not that high, which will be enough to ensure that any depreciation or devaluation will be correcting the balance of payment deficit. However, in 1950, Orcutt tried to show that the regression technique that was used to estimate elasticities in these studies grossly underestimated the true elasticities in the context of international trade. So it is most likely that Marshall was broadly correct, while the econometric estimates and the econometric modelings, if they could be rectified, then the results may be in line with what Marshall had tried to mention. In fact, the studies in 1940s tried to measure the short-run elasticities also, and they obtained very important results. A study has shown that the quantities would respond to price changes in international trade with sufficient lag, so that if price changes now or the exchange rate changes now, then the exports, imports, and hence the balance of trade will respond with significant lags. From here we get a very important result or very important effect, which is called the J-curve effect. The J-curve effect shows that a nation's trade balance will worsen soon after the devaluation or depreciation because of the tendency of the domestic currency price of imports to rise further than the export prices, and the quantities initially will not change very much. Over time, the quantity of export will rise and quantity of import will fall, and the export prices would catch up with the import prices, so that the initial deterioration in the nation's balance of trade will be halted and then reversed. Later on, some studies were done in 1960s, 70s and 80s. These studies found out some estimation of the long run elasticities that were almost twice as high as those found in the empirical studies of the 1940s. So the results of these studies mention that in fact there is no such thing called the export pessimism. The elasticities in the real world are high enough to ensure stability of the foreign exchange market in the short run and also to result in fairly elastic demand and supply schedules in the longer run. So that in the very short run, of course, there may be certain problems, but over the short term and the longer term, you no longer have the J curve effect. Rather, the depreciation or devaluation will surely be increasing the balance of trade.